Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, sometimes even maybe turbulent period of life, early adolescence.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
talking roughly ages 10 to 14.
that's right.
And our guide for this exploration is this fascinating document called Guia de la Rama Scouts,
Uh-huh.
From the Scouts to Argentina.
Yeah,
This is really, it's almost like our cheat sheet to
exactly.
understanding how the Scout movement views and approaches this particular age group.
It's a really great resource, actually. It provides a really structured and, I'd say, insightful perspective on their developmental needs.
Yeah.
What are they going through at this age, and how can we as, adults and educators support them during this really kind of crucial time?
Yeah.
And also the educational philosophy behind the Scout movement for this specific age group. I mean, it's really targeted.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to get this kind of insider's view, if you will.
Yeah. And I think what's really valuable for our listeners is that we're trying to distill. Yes.
The most crucial insights from this dia
Yeah, absolutely.
so that you can walk away with a much clearer understanding
Right.
of the shifts,
Yes.
the changes, the fundamental needs of this group.
Definitely. And just understanding what's going on in their world. I mean, so much is happening
Yeah.
biologically, emotionally, socially, that it can be I think really helpful to have this kind of framework to understand it all.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really leaps out at me right at the beginning of the Gia
Right.
is just how much emphasis is placed on the intensity
Yeah.
of the physical changes.
Oh, absolutely.
Puberty is in full swing.
Yes.
And it really does have this really profound effect on how they perceive themselves.
He really does.
The Gia talks about the schema corporal,
Yes.
which is essentially their internal.
Like their body image.
Yes.
How they view their body.
Yeah.
And how it relates to the world around them. And they're having to constantly recalibrate it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're growing so quickly. Their bodies are changing so rapidly
Yeah.
that it's like their internal map of themselves is constantly being updated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like they're trying to catch up to who they're becoming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can be really disorienting.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine, your body's changing, you're feeling different, you're looking different.
Right.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah. And the Gia actually emphasizes that young people
Yeah.
need to learn
Yeah.
to inhabit.
To inhabit.
Yeah, these new bodies.
Right. Because it's not just about the physical changes themselves.
Right.
It's about the process of understanding those changes
Yeah.
and coming to terms with them.
Yeah.
So, building that body awareness that you mentioned, discovering their physical potential. What can their bodies now do
Right.
that maybe they couldn't do before, but also acknowledging any limitations. Maybe there are things that they're not as good at as they thought they were or as their friends are.
Yeah.
And that can be a challenge too.
Yeah. And the Scout approach, as the Gia explains it, is really designed to help them
Yeah.
use these activities.
Exactly. To explore their new physical possibilities, to push their boundaries, to see what they're capable of
Right.
in a safe and supportive environment.
Yeah. Because it really is. I mean, it's more than just, a few growth spurts.
Oh, absolutely.
And a voice changing.
Right. This is a really fundamental shift
Right.
in who they are, how they perceive themselves,
Yeah.
and how they relate to the world around them.
Yeah. And alongside this sort of internal renegotiation with
Yeah.
their physical selves,
Yes.
the Gia also highlights this increasing move away
Yeah.
from the family unit.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Right.
That's a big
The
one.
classic quest for independence.
Oh, yeah. That's a hallmark of adolescence,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That need to kind of separate from the family,
Right.
to establish their own identity,
Right.
to become their own person.
Yeah. And if you look at the overall arc of development,
Right.
this is really a pivotal step.
It is. It is. And it goes hand in hand, I think, with this need to find their place
Right.
in a group of their peers.
Yeah.
They're moving away from the family,
Yeah.
but they need to find somewhere else to belong.
Right.
They need to find that acceptance.
Yeah. And that's where the Scouts patrol system seems really insightful to me.
Yes, it is.
Because the Gia doesn't just view these patrols as random groupings.
No. They're very intentional.
Right.
Very intentional.
They're spaces that are designed
Right.
to meet this deep-seated
Right.
need for belonging.
Yes, absolutely. And not just belonging, but for friendship, for moral support.
Right.
for affection, for all of those things that they're maybe not getting as much from their family anymore because they're trying to separate.
Yeah. And it's almost like a carefully constructed social environment.
It is. It is. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating how the Gia even uses the word gang,
Right.
but not in a negative way at all.
Yeah.
Not in a way that we typically think of gangs,
Right.
but to explain how within these patrols, individual identity is actually strengthened
Right.
by the similarities they discover with each other.
Yeah.
So it's like this paradox.
Yeah.
They're trying to become their own individuals,
Right.
but they're doing it by finding common ground with others.
Yeah.
And so, the shared inside jokes,
Right.
the development of, unique patrol names, maybe even similar clothing
Yeah.
or insignias. These all contribute to this sense of us,
Yeah.
a sense of shared identity.
Yeah. It's like they're creating this mini community
They are. They are.
where they can experiment with who they are,
Right.
but in a really safe environment.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's noteworthy that the Gia also points out the opportunity
Yes.
within scouting
Right.
to foster
Yes.
respectful and responsible interactions
Right.
between genders,
Right. Between genders.
which is really, I mean, that's a really important aspect at this age.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Because they are navigating these new social complexities.
Right.
And figuring out, how to relate to each other.
Right.
And so providing these structured and guided opportunities for positive cross-gender relationships can be incredibly beneficial.
Yeah. I think it's really noteworthy that they're bringing that up specifically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, another thing that the Gia talks about
Yeah.
is this urge to explore and discover.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one, too.
And it's not just about
It's not just physical,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's about exploring new ideas, new perspectives.
Right.
It's about kind of pushing the boundaries of their knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
They're curious.
Yeah.
They want to learn.
Yeah. They're
Stop.
seeking out these new territories.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
New territories, new dimensions, new perspectives,
Yeah.
It's all about that.
Yeah. And the Gia is very clear.
Yes.
The familiar.
Right.
The group patio, as they call it.
Yeah, the group patio, that's their term.
Right. It's just not enough.
It's not enough. They need more.
Right.
They need more. They need to get out there.
Yeah.
They need to experience new things.
Yeah. And they talk about the need to offer diverse environments.
Right. Diverse environments, challenging situations.
Right.
Situations that force them to think outside the box.
Right.
To really kind of stretch their minds and their abilities.
Yeah. And I think this is so important.
It is.
It's about empowering these young people
Yes.
to be the protagonists
Right.
of their own stories.
Yes. Not just spectators.
Right. Not just watching other people,
Right.
have the adventures.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. They need to be in the driver's seat.
Yeah. And the Gia makes it very clear that
Yes.
this element
Right.
of exploration and adventure
Yeah.
is central to the Scouts' educational philosophy.
It is. It is. It's woven into the fabric of the Scout method.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, having fun,
Right.
although that's important too.
Yeah.
But it's about using those experiences
Right.
to learn and grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's got to be genuine.
It does. It
Right?
does.
It can't just be these
Right.
sort of contrived activities.
Exactly. They need to be real.
Yeah.
They need to be meaningful.
No, one of the things that the Gia introduces that I think is so valuable is this concept of the adolescences.
Oh, yes.
Yes. In the plural.
In the plural, right.
And that right away.
Right there, that tells
Yeah.
you something.
Yeah.
That tells you that we're not talking about one monolithic experience.
Right.
Right. Adolescence is not just one thing.
It's multiple things.
Yeah. And they're very clear
Yes.
that developmental changes.
Right. Whether they're physical, emotional, social,
Yeah.
they unfold throughout life.
Right.
And they're constantly being shaped by this interplay between our genetics and the environment we're in.
Right.
So it's not, it's not just nature, it's not just nurture,
Right.
it's this complex interaction of the two.
Right. And that leads to this understanding that
Yes.
the typical developmental stages.
Right. The ones that we read about in textbooks.
Right.
The ones that we kind of have in our minds, they're not universal.
Right.
They're not set in stone
Yeah.
because everyone is different.
Right.
Everyone has their own unique genetic makeup.
Right.
Everyone has their own unique set of experiences.
Right.
So it's not going to look the same for everyone.
Yeah. And the Gaia gives these really powerful examples
To do.
to illustrate this
Yeah.
about how the experience of adolescence.
Is shaped by things like socioeconomic status.
Yes.
Gender.
Yeah,
Generation, the specific youth culture they're a part of.
absolutely.
They compare
Yeah.
a boy growing up in a marginalized urban environment
Right.
versus an indigenous girl
Yes.
in a small rural town
Yeah.
versus, a middle-class teenager navigating
Yeah.
the world
Yeah.
during COVID-19.
Right. I mean, those are dramatically different realities.
Right.
And they're going to have a profound impact on how those young people experience adolescence.
Right. And I think it really highlights the need
It's
for this individualized approach.
Absolutely.
And it sort of underscores the fact that
Yeah.
there isn't this one
There isn't.
idealized or even stigmatized
Right.
version of what it means
Exactly.
to be an adolescent.
It's not a one-size-fits-all experience.
Right.
And I think that's something that, we as adults sometimes forget.
Yeah.
We have our own ideas about what adolescence is supposed to be like.
Right.
But the reality is much more complex.
Yeah.
Much more nuanced.
Yeah. And the Gia doesn't shy away from acknowledging
Doesn't.
the difficult socioeconomic realities
Right. It challenges.
that a lot of young people
Yeah, especially in Argentina.
in Argentina face.
Right.
They cite data from UNICEF
Yes.
that highlights the significant percentage
Right.
of children and adolescents living in poverty.
Yeah. It's a real issue.
And it really kind of underscores the need to understand
It does.
that we can't just look at this from a purely developmental perspective.
Right.
We have to consider
They do.
the broader context.
The context, the social context, the economic context,
Right.
all of that plays a role.
Yeah. And now focusing in
Yes.
on that specific age range
Right.
of 10
10, 11.
or 11 to 13, 14.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot for the Rama Scouts. That's the age group they're focused on.
The Gia points out
Yes.
that this is typically
Yes.
when puberty really takes hold.
It does.
Right.
This is when things really start to change.
It's that biological process
Yes.
that really has these ripple effects
It does.
across
Yes.
their physical, emotional, social worlds.
All of it. All of it is impacted.
Yeah. And the Gia is very careful to distinguish between
Yes.
puberty, which is the biological changes.
Right. The hormones, the growth spurts.
Right.
All of that.
And adolescence.
Right.
Which is more about...
More about the social and cultural aspects.
Right.
How they're fitting into society.
Yeah.
How they're developing their identity.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important distinction.
It is.
Because they are connected, but they are distinct processes.
Yes, absolutely.
Puberty is kind of like the biological engine starting up.
It is.
And adolescence is the broader journey.
Yeah. The journey they're embarking on.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Gia explains that puberty is really what kicks off this process
Yeah.
of building a personal identity.
Right. It kind of sets the stage.
Right.
And then everything else starts to unfold from there.
And sexuality becomes
Yes.
a much more prominent aspect of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge part of this whole process.
And they have this great line.
Yeah.
They say the biological opens to the social.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Right.
Because it's true, the physical changes of puberty,
Right.
they kind of trigger this whole cascade of social and emotional changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And these transformations
Yeah.
really necessitate an adaptation.
They do.
To
A new body.
Right. I mean, they're literally getting a new body.
Right.
And they have to figure out how to live in it.
Yeah.
How to be comfortable in it.
And the Gia describes it as,
Oh, it's a great description. A period of mourning
yes,
for the lost childhood body.
mourning for the lost childhood body.
Right. Which I think is really insightful.
It is. It's like they're losing something.
Right.
They're losing that familiarity.
Right.
They're losing that sense of who they were.
Yeah.
And they have to grieve that loss.
Yeah. And at the same time,
Right.
their brains are also undergoing
Oh, yeah. Huge changes in the brain.
huge developments.
Yeah. I mean, the brain is it's like a construction site at this age.
Right.
There's so much going on.
And the Gia mentions specifically the frontal lobe
Yes.
starting to mature.
Right. The frontal lobe, which is responsible for all those higher level thinking skills.
Yeah.
planning, decision-making, impulse control,
Right.
all of that good stuff.
And it unlocks all these new intellectual capabilities.
Yes, it does.
They start to be able to think abstractly,
Right.
formulate and test ideas,
Yeah.
draw conclusions, reflect on values, even start to think about the future.
Right.
And I think this has real implications
Yes,
for
it
how
does.
we interact with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
We need to be patient.
Yeah.
We need to be understanding.
Right.
We need to provide support
Yeah.
because their brains are still developing
Yeah.
and they're not always going to make the best decisions.
Right.
But that's okay.
Right.
That's part of the process.
Yeah.
They're learning.
And the Gia quite rightly calls adolescents human beings under construction.
It's such a great phrase.
Right.
Because it really captures what's going on.
Yeah.
Their brains are still being remodeled.
Right.
Their personalities are still taking shape.
Right.
So we need to be careful about making definitive statements about who they are or what they're going to be.
Right.
Because they're still evolving.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it really reframes
Does.
this period
Yeah.
as not just awkwardness and rebellion.
Right. Which is often how we think of adolescence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as a time of real blossoming.
Right.
A time of new possibilities.
Yeah.
A time of self-discovery.
Yeah. And the Gia emphasizes that the role of adults
Yes.
is to collaborate.
To collaborate, to support.
Yeah.
Not to control.
Right.
Not to stifle.
Yeah. Yeah. And a big part of that is
Yeah.
helping them navigate
Right.
this developing sexuality.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
the Gia addresses this
It does. It does.
quite directly.
It does.
And talks about the importance of
Yes.
providing
Right.
accurate information.
Accurate, age-appropriate information.
Right. About those pubertal changes.
Yeah.
Menstruation, wet dreams, all of that.
Right.
As a normal and healthy.
Exactly. It's all part of development.
Right.
It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
It's nothing to be scared of.
Yeah. And they also stress the need
They do.
to address topics related to pregnancy.
Right.
Right.
The biological, the social, the psychological aspects of it,
All of it. All of it.
including information
Yes.
about contraception
Right.
and STIs.
Absolutely.
And they really advocate for creating these
yes.
safe and open spaces
Safe spaces.
where young people can discuss sexuality.
Right. In a holistic way.
Yeah. And I think that's so important.
It is. It is. Because it's not just about the biology.
Right.
It's about the emotions.
Yeah.
It's about the relationships.
Yeah.
It's about the values.
Yeah.
All of that comes into play.
And as all these internal and biological changes are happening,
Yeah.
their social world is also undergoing
Oh, yeah.
a dramatic shift.
A huge shift.
And the Gia notes
Yes.
this increasing preference
Right.
for being with peers.
Yeah. They want to be with their friends.
Right.
They want to be with people who understand what they're going through.
Yeah. And seeking support
Yes.
from others
right.
who are going through similar experiences.
Who are in the same boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who get it.
And the peer group really
It does.
starts to move to the forefront
Yeah.
and oftentimes surpasses the family.
It does. It does.
As a source of identification and a primary reference point.
Right. The family's still important,
Right.
but the peer group becomes increasingly important.
And there's this really intense need
There is.
for peer acceptance.
Oh, yeah.
And a real fear of social rejection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a big part of adolescence.
Yeah.
That fear of not fitting in.
Right.
That fear of being different.
Yeah.
That fear of being rejected.
Yeah. And the Gia points out
It does.
this inherent tension
Yes.
between the desire for independence
Right.
from the family
Yeah.
and then the need to belong
Right.
to a peer group.
It's like a push and pull.
Right.
They want to be independent.
Right.
But they also want to belong.
Yeah.
And those two things can sometimes be in conflict.
Yeah.
And then on top of that,
Yeah.
you have the hormones.
Yeah.
You have the risk-taking behavior.
And the Gia gives this really insightful
He does.
neurological explanation for this.
Yeah.
They talk about how the prefrontal cortex,
Yes.
which is the part of the brain responsible for
Right. Decision-making, planning, self-control.
right.
All the things that teenagers are not so good at.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't fully mature until much later.
Until much later, like mid-20s, sometimes even later.
Right.
So they're kind of running on this half-built brain.
Right.
They have all these emotions,
Yeah.
all these impulses,
Right.
but they don't have the the brain power yet
Right.
to really control them.
And in contrast to that, the limbic system,
Yes.
which processes emotions,
Right.
develops earlier.
Develops earlier.
So, they're making decisions
Right.
where emotional factors have a much stronger influence
They do.
than rational ones.
Yes, they're driven by their emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much more so than adults are.
And it's not just about the pace of brain development in different areas.
Yep.
The GIA also talks about
Yes.
the increased production of dopamine
Dopamine. Yes.
during adolescence.
Right. Which is the feel-good chemical,
Yeah.
the reward chemical.
And that activates the reward pathways in the brain.
Yes, it does.
And it leads to...
it leads to a greater seeking of new sensations of pleasure.
Right.
They want to feel good.
Yeah.
They want to experience new things.
Right.
And they're more likely to take risks to do that.
And I think that social validation
Oh, yeah.
from peers.
That's huge.